particularly as it relates to Thrive 2025. Karen is someone who works tirelessly. She's from Polk County. She leads a national group that is seeking to educate, inform, and push back against Agenda 21. And I think you'll be really pleased to hear about some of the things that she's going to share with you tonight in terms of her knowledge. But hopefully she'll challenge each one of us of the real threat that this Common Core standards represents to you individually, your children, your grandchildren, and our state. So help me welcome Karen Bracken.
Thank you, and I want to thank everybody who took the time to come this evening, and I want to thank Mark for inviting me to come and speak to you about Common Core standards. Our presentation tonight is called Education Without Representation, and I think once we're done with the presentation, you'll understand why I entitled it that way. We're going to be talking about Common Core standards, okay? This is not curriculum, this is not assessment, this is the standards. But understand that standards do and will drive curriculum and assessments that come along. Common Core standards currently only affect English language arts and math. So if you're looking at your children's or your grandchildren's history books and you're appalled at what you're seeing, or if you're looking at their social study books and you're appalled at what you're seeing, that is not Common Core. That's the indoctrination of our children that's been going on for years. So again, Common Core is only right now English language arts and math. This is a book that I know is currently being used in Shelby County. It's third grade social studies book. Again, Common Core has nothing to do with this, but all throughout this book it talks about the common good, our democratic form of government in the United States. It does not talk about a republic, okay? And this book has probably been around for years, but it is currently being used in the Tennessee schools. Okay, the federal takeover of education and the indoctrination of our children did not start with the Obama administration. It has been going on for many years, and many presidents, including Ronald Reagan, have been promoting this indoctrination. I believe it's important that you not only understand Common Core and what it is, but how it got here, who's behind it, and the agenda. And there is an agenda, and unfortunately it's not an American agenda. I'm not going to ask you tonight to agree with anything I'm saying or disagree with anything I'm saying. What I'm asking you to do is listen and keep an open mind, take notes, write down people's names, write down documents that I talk about, and go home and do your own research and come up with your own conclusions about Common Core. Okay, I have notes because if I don't stick to some kind of notes, I'm going to be talking to you for 3 hours. So it's a very passionate subject. All right, I'm going to start off just to kind of set the mood. This is Lamar Alexander from back in 1989. This is a very poor quality recording, but I'd like you to try to listen as closely as you can.
As far as I know, the first state summit following the President's Summit, and I think that's a great credit to your governor and to the state of Kansas to be doing that. At least your timing's good. And I would suggest 3 things. Number 1, find out what's really going on, because I don't think most people know what's going on in schools, how children are growing up, or what's really going on in the world. Number 2, I want to suggest that you create in Kansas a brand new American school. Brand new American school. And number 3, I want to suggest that when you do that, you help that new school develop some new goals and new report cards for itself. I would go down to the maternity ward of the local hospital, or whatever you call the part of the hospital where the nurses are, who are there when the babies are born, and find out how many babies are born out of wedlock, how many babies are born with single parents, just so you know that. I would think the brand new American school would be year-round, open from 6 to 6. Second characteristic might be that these schools will serve children from age 3 months old to age 18. That may be a shocking thought to you, But if you were to do an inventory of every baby in your community and think about what the needs of those babies were for the next 4 or 5 years, you might see that those needs might not be served any other way. They have to be served in some way, and maybe around the school. Or if you studied a little more, you might go back and think the school might even need to serve the pregnant mother of the baby in terms of prenatal health care. Teams of teachers. Albert Shanker suggested that maybe there ought to be a team of teachers attached to a child from the day that child arrives in the school to stay with that child all the way to the 8th grade. All this would mean there would have to be a very professional corps of teachers, wouldn't it? They'd have to be very, very good, because they would be dealing with lots of volunteers. We have a big national service feeling in America today. Why aren't those people working in schools? Well, one reason is it's hard to handle volunteers. So this team of highly trained principals and teachers would have to have career ladders. They would need to be master teachers. They would need to be paid $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 a year to create a brand new American school in every state capital. The great advantage of that would be there wouldn't be all these arguments about whether to do this program or that program or which one to do first. You wouldn't do any of it. You would create one school, and you'd give the responsibility to one person who would form one team, and you give them 1 year or so, and if they succeeded, then all the rest of us would want to be in that school too, wouldn't we? And so,
Little short 3-minute movie. Remember, this is from 1989. So when I tell you that this strange philosophy has been going on for a long time, I think this is indicative of that. And you know, what I get from this is he's saying to us that the government knows better how to raise our children than we do. That's what I get out of it. I don't know what, anybody else will. Okay, how did this happen? I'm just going to give you a brief timeline. Like I said, this has been going on for a long time. Originally, this slide started back in like 1990, and I, brought it alive. But how this happened in February 2009, remember, President Obama was sworn into office January 2009. I'm sorry. 1 month later, February 2009, the stimulus bill was signed. And when that bill was signed, President Obama promised the money was going to be used for reducing the unemployment rate, stimulating, creating jobs. In my opinion, the stimulus bill was created to pay off his campaign cronies and to bypass Congress to get things implemented that he knew Congress would never support or give funding for. He allotted $4.35 billion to the Federal Department of Education. And during a CNN interview with Arne Duncan, he was asked what his plans were for that $4.35 billion. And he said that he wanted to be a catalyst for Common Core. The Federal Department of Education created Race to the Top competition. Normally, federal money is given out to the states for education based on different formulas, but it's given out to every state. What they decided to do was make this a competition, because we all like competition and we all like to be able to say we won. So they put a new spin on it. Phase 1 of Race to the Top, and there are multiple phases, but phase 1, the application period started in November 2009 and it ended in January 2010. That's only a couple months. Tennessee, I believe their application was created because we did apply in phase 1, and their application was created on January the 18th, 2010. Just so you know that we were in phase 1 of Race to the Top. To successfully apply for Race to the Top grants, states had to agree to Common Core standards sight unseen. They deny this, but I can tell you that the draft of the standards was not even released until March of 2010. And we applied in January 2010. Now, I've gone through the application. It's over 200 pages long. In the section where they talk about new standards, it does not say Common Core by name. It just says that you will agree to adopt new standards. But again, those new standards were never seen by our governor, and it was Governor Bredesen, by the way, that did file for Race to the Top. This is a map. I belong to a national group for Common Core as well, and one of the members of that group created this map. I think it's awesome. The blue states that you see are states that did not take Race to the Top money. They're not implementing Common Core. Bad news about Texas is in about 85% of their schools, they're currently implementing a program called C-Scope. And C-Scope is every bit, if not worse, than Common Core. And they're addressing that. Their parents there are in a total uproar, and they've made some major changes. But the blue states did not take Common Core. The red states are states that currently have legislation pending to either repeal Common Core or to suspend it. The gray states, of course, are the ones that are kind of still asleep. But there's a lot of people that are waking up and are fighting Common Core in the gray states. It's just that there is no legislation, and it's my hope that next year Tennessee will have legislation, and that's where we're going to need everybody to help us. I have been spending this session going up to Nashville, talking to legislators and educating them. Our legislators do not have a clue about Common Core. So you cannot blame them. They don't know. This thing was slipped in under the radar. I don't even know if Governor Bredesen knew about it. It really doesn't matter at this point. We know about it now, and we have to do something about it. So we're having a big event on April the 30th in Nashville. All the state representatives and senators have been invited. We've got 750 registered people coming to that event. We had to shut down the registration after 2 weeks because we were totally sold out. So I think if we had a room for 2,000, we probably would have filled that room. So we're going through what I call the education process right now, trying to educate our legislators because they are the ones that can stop this for us. You can't, our school boards can't, it has to be at the state level. And this map is in the process of being updated. I believe we've got 1 or 2 more states that have turned red. Okay. Just some interesting facts about the application process. I was doing so much research on Common Core that I kind of neglected actually looking into the state of Tennessee and what happened and what did the application look like. 45 states plus DC applied for Race to the Top. Only 11 states and DC actually won money. But all states that applied had to commit to implementing new standards, even if they did not win money. They were also promised No Child Left Behind waivers, and there was also the threat that if they did not sign on to the standards, they would lose Title I funding. And in Tennessee, in the year of 2012, we got $300 million in Title I funding, so that would have been a lot of money for the state of Tennessee to lose in our Title I program. Tennessee was awarded $500 million in Phase 1 of Race to the Top. And remember, that was January, the standards were released in March. Tennessee's score was 444.2 points. They came in second out of 16 states that applied in Phase 1. And the most points you could get was 500. It's 485, plus you get an extra 15 points if you were implementing a STEM program. The section of the application where Common Core or the new standards was found was called Accepting New Standards. And that section, you could get up to 70 points, which was 14% of the total points, just for accepting new standards. And then the section for the database was 47 points, or 9.4% of the total score. But the two of them come together. The database, where they're going to track your children and their family from pre-K until workforce, is a match set. So together, that equaled 117 points, or 23.4% of the total score, just because you accepted the standards and the database that went along with it. But if you looked at the section on the application called Improving Poor Performing Schools, that section earned 50 points, which was 10%. So what that tells me is implementing Common Core and the database that goes along was more important than improving poor performing schools. Some states changed laws in order to increase their chances of winning Race to the Top. In 2009, Tennessee passed a law to increase the number of charter schools from 50 to 90. And if you look at the general section of the application, which addresses charter schools, that was equal to 55 points, or 11% of the total. Again, worth more than improving poor performing schools. Education First, which is an organization here in Tennessee, assisted in all facets of Race to the Top application process in Tennessee. They list Achieve. Achieve doesn't mean much to you right now, but it will by the time we're done. They list an organization by the name of Achieve, Bill and Melinda Gates, and the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation as clients. The William and Hewlett, and I'm sure you all know who Bill and Melinda Gates are, but for those that might not know the Hewletts, they support the Open Society, which is George Soros, Nature Conservancy, and the Joyce Foundation, and they're deeply embedded in Agenda 21 projects. Education First also supports the goals of the UN Education First initiative. There is a UN initiative called Education First, and they have a list of goals. Number 3 on that list of goals is fostering global citizenship through education. Education First here in Tennessee, I personally contacted them. I have an email that they sent back to me and basically said, while they support the goals of UN Education First initiative, they're not affiliated. So I don't know, that's what they said. Okay, in phase 1 of Race to the Top, Massachusetts had one of the best, they had an A rating in math and English language arts. So when they applied for Race to the Top in phase 1, they did not agree to accept the new standards because their standards were far superior already, so why accept new standards? By not agreeing to the new standards, they ranked 13 out of 16 in phase 1. In phase 2, which started in June of 2010, the only thing they changed on their application was accepting the Common Core standards, and they went to number 1 out of the rankings in phase 2. So I just think this drives home how significant and how much weight agreeing to those standards played in winning Race to the Top competition. Who is behind Common Core? There's a group by the name, they call them NGA. It's a National Governors Association. Sounds very governmenty, kind of like the Federal Reserve, but it has nothing to do with the government. It is a trade association. NGA, along with CCSSO, owns the copyright to the standards, which means no one but NGA or CCSSO can change anything about those standards. They own the copyright. Governor Haslam is on the Finance Committee for NGA. Achieve is an organization that was created by NGA, and they were primarily responsible for writing the standards. Of course, they'll tell you that the states wrote the standards, and there was a whole big committee of all kinds of people from the states that participated in this. Governor Haslam also sits on the board of directors for Achieve. Cozy. And then we have the CCSSO, which is the Council of Chief State School Officers. Again, another trade organization. So those 3 groups, NGA, Achieve, CCSSO, were very instrumental in creating the standards. The Obama administration, of course, Arne Duncan, Rupert Murdoch and Joel Klein of Wireless Generation, George Soros, the Pearson Foundation, which is it's a company based out of the United Kingdom. Since 1988, the Pearson Foundation, or some people call them Pearson Education, has been buying up all of the educational publishing companies like McGraw-Hill and Houghton Mifflin and blah, 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 but they allow these companies to keep their own name so that it doesn't appear to be what it really is, a monopoly. Sir Michael Barber, who is a globalist, a radical left-wing globalist, and he works for Pearson, pretty much runs Pearson. And then we have Bill Ayers and his friend Linda Darling-Hammond, who are far left radicals. Linda Darling-Hammond, you may never heard of her. She was Obama's first choice for Secretary of Education. She was so radical that even the progressives in DC would not accept her, and we got Arne Duncan as choice number 2. And Bill Ayers is kind of why I got involved with Common Core, because I, like many people, said, wow, this sounds really great, vigorous, internationally benchmarked, you know, it sounds wonderful. And I read an article about Bill Ayers one day, and in the article it was talking about his work with Common Core. And right then and there I said, there's got to be something bad going on here. And that's how I got started. Jeb Bush and his Foundation for Excellence in Education, FEE, and the Chiefs for Change, he is deeply embedded in this process. Marc Tucker, a longtime associate of Bill and Hillary Clinton. David Coleman, his Student Achievement Partners, that's a group, played a leading role in developing Common Core standards for math and literacy. He now sits as the head of the College Examination Board, which was given $30 million by Mr. Gates. Coleman said he will align the SAT with Common Core. Now, I want you to think about that and how that might affect homeschool, how that might affect private school. If you're homeschooling your children for the reasons that most people homeschool their children, if you want them to be able to take the SAT, if they're not taking Common Core, they're not going to be able to pass the SAT. The ACT is already aligned. And this is a statement from David Coleman. What children need, asserts Coleman, is a close reading of informational text. That's what he calls nonfiction. No opinion, no flights of fancy, no creation of new worlds. The teacher's job is to make sure kids stick just to the text. Informational text, pronounces Coleman, is what will give students the world knowledge necessary to compete as workers in the global economy. Coleman insists that teachers must train students to be workers in the global economy. And this man now sits at the head of our College Examination Board, and he was very instrumental in writing the standards. And that's another thing you'll find as you research. It's an incestuous relationship. All these people just keep like moving from place to place. They work for Gates, and then they work for NCEE, and then they work for, it's just all the same people just keep rotating all throughout this. UNESCO, United Nations, Education, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, and then there is the big three. Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, they are the major funders, and they have money in every aspect, every facet, from the PTA all the way up to the president. They paid $1 million to the National PTA for them to support Common Core. And then there is the Walton Family Foundation and a Eli and Edith Broad Foundation. And the superintendent, I did a Knoxville presentation on Tuesday. They were very happy to hear this. The superintendent of Knoxville Schools, Mr. McIntyre, is a 2006 graduate of the Broad Superintendent Academy. That is a company that takes people from the business world, from military, from law, you know, all different aspects of business, and trains them to get into the education field as supervisors and leaders. They pay for all their training, they pay for all of their travel expenses, and they are trained to implement the Broad philosophy and agenda for education. On April the 3rd, I attended up in the University of Tennessee, Knoxville, a speech given by Arne Duncan. and I went with a group of women, and as we were leaving, out in front of us I had to get a picture of it. Billionaire Eli Broad. And on the left you see James P. McIntyre, Broad, Superintendent's Academy, 2006. This is how I know my information is correct. Never a classroom teacher or principal, moving the Eli Broad agenda in Knox County. The Broad agenda: destroy public education, privatize it. And then we have a little statement here about Arne Duncan. There was a whole bunch of people standing out there with different signs against Mr. Duncan. Okay, what I want to do is just take a few minutes to go over some of the people that we talked about on who's behind this Common Core. Marc Tucker, he goes all the way back to the Clinton administration. And in 1992, right after President Clinton was elected, he wrote a letter. It's called the letter, it's an infamous letter called the Dear Hillary letter. It's 18 pages long, and it lays out his plan for education. And just a quote from that plan: to remold the entire American system into a seamless web that literally extends from cradle to grave. I think we've heard that terminology very recently. And is the same system for everyone. I think that's Common Core. Coordinated by a system of labor market boards at the local, state, and federal levels, where curriculum and job matching will be handled by counselors assessing the integrated computer-based program. Again, this is 1992. Tucker's ambitious plan was implemented in 3 laws passed by Congress and signed by President Clinton in 1994. The Goals 2000 Act, School to Work Act, and the reauthorized Elementary and Secondary Education Act. These laws establish the following mechanisms to restructure the public schools. Some of the items that you can find in these laws are to bypass all elected officials on school boards and in state legislators. That sounds like charter schools. By making federal funds flow to the governor and his appointees on workforce development boards. Number 2, use a computer database, AKA a labor market information system, into which school personnel would scan all information about every school child and his family, identified by the child's social security number, academic, medical, mental, psychological, behavioral, and interrogations by counselors. The computerized data would be available to the school, the government, and future employers. To use national standards and national testing to cement national control of test assessments, school honors, rewards, financial aid, which I believe the federal government controls now, and the Certificate of Initial Mastery, CIM, which is designed to replace the high school diploma. So this was his plan, and it was promoted by President Clinton in these 3 acts. UNESCO. In 1984, President Reagan realized that UNESCO was a bad player, and he withdrew the United States from participating with UNESCO. And he did so because of their anti-Western and far-left propaganda. In 2003, and I want you to start paying attention to some of these dates, 2003, George Bush reunited the United States and UNESCO. The Washington Times in 2004 had an article called Learning Globally. The Bush administration has begun issuing grants to spread United Nations-sponsored program that aims to become a universal curriculum for teaching global citizenship, and it's called International Baccalaureate. And we have many schools in Tennessee that do promote IB courses. George Walker, IB's Director General in Geneva, said in June, the program remains committed to changing children's values so they think globally rather than in parochial national terms from their own country's viewpoint. The IB curriculum, UNESCO said, would promote human rights and social justice, the need for sustainable development, Agenda 21, and address population, health, environmental, and immigration concerns. And I don't hear a whole lot of talk in here about reading, writing, and arithmetic. Okay. Just a little bit more about UNESCO. They created a book called Toward World Understanding, and it's a book that it was intended for teachers to learn what and how they're supposed to teach. And one of the statements from this book, as long as the child breathes the poisoned air of nationalism, education in world-mindedness can produce only rather precarious results. As we have pointed out, it is frequently the family that infects the child with extreme nationalism. And I think you can all agree that probably since the 60s, we've seen such a decline and attack on the family. And that's on purpose. That is on purpose. The prime mover for UNESCO back in 1945 was a gentleman by the name, I use that term lightly, Julian Huxley. And Huxley served as UNESCO's first director. He was also the vice president of the Eugenics Society from 1937 to 1944. And in 1947, Huxley wrote, "Thus, even though it is quite true that any radical eugenic policy will be for many years politically and psychologically impossible, it will be important for UNESCO to see that the eugenic problem is examined with the greatest of care, and that the public mind is informed of issues at stake, so that much that is now unthinkable may at least become thinkable." And this to me was extremely profound in that I look at the issue of abortion, and did anybody ever think that 20 years ago we would even be talking about partial birth abortion? And today it is a topic that many people are talking about. And it just came to my mind that, this is what they've been doing over these years, is just desensitizing us to accept things that at one time were unthinkable, and now they are thinkable. Bill Gates. Remember I said, remember the dates, 2003, George Bush reunited UNESCO and the United States. November 17th, 2004, Bill Gates signed an agreement with UNESCO. This is the agreement. Anybody wants to come and look at it, you're more than welcome. After signing every page of this agreement, Bill Gates and Microsoft agrees to support the objectives of the UNESCO Constitution. It might be nice if you thought about supporting the United States Constitution. Amen. And to advance the Millennium Development Goals for universal basic education, a master syllabus for teacher training, and UNESCO will be responsible for the content development. And this is an agreement that he signed in 2004. So again, you can see how all of these pieces have been set into play starting back in about 1992, and all these bills that got passed. And now we've got back with UNESCO, and then, gee, how coincidental, in 2004, Bill Gates signs a cooperation agreement with UNESCO. Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation is a major funder of Common Core. Why? They have spent approximately $170 million to bribe anyone that gets in their way, and they form partnerships that give him total control. The National PTA, Achieve, NGA, CCSSO, NCEE, and that is just a short list. In 2011, Gates, and you remember I talked about the Pearson Foundation, how they bought up all the educational companies, the book writing companies. Well, guess what? In 2011, Bill Gates and the Pearson Foundation joined a partnership to offer online courses and ebooks. Why? You have to keep asking yourself that question. 2012, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and the British government co-hosted a new London conference on eugenics with global coalition partners such as American Planned Parenthood, founder Margaret Sanger, who was a eugenicist, British Marie Stopes International, who was a eugenicist, and the United Nations Populations Fund. Bill Gates' father was also a member of the National Board of Planned Parenthood. Bill Gates is also heavily invested in Monsanto, and that's a story for another day. The Millennium Development Goals, in case you've never heard of them, they are a set of 8 goals with the completion objective of 2015. UNESCO also supports the Earth Charter. The Earth Charter was written by Maurice Strong and Mikhail Gorbachev, and it is their dream that someday the Earth Charter will replace the Ten Commandments. 2009, President Obama named David Killian as the permanent ambassador to UNESCO. And David Killian was very influential in the decision to reunite the United States with UNESCO, even against a lot of opposition. I couldn't resist this picture. We have Ted Turner on the left. We have William Gates Sr., David Rockefeller, and George Soros. Just in case they tell you they don't know each other. Okay. You know, when I talked to the people in Knoxville on Tuesday, I apologized for, it seems like we come to these meetings and all we ever talk about is bad news. And I said, someday I really hope that I can come back and talk about something good and happy, some successes that we've experienced. Well, I'm glad to tell you that tonight you're going to be the bearer of some good news instead of all the bad news. Now, I was going to sit here and read to you how they defend Common Core, all the arguments that they give you. It's internationally benchmarked and it's rigorous criteria and it's going to help kids when you move from state to state. What I would like to do is just read to you a letter that I received this morning. Last night I got a letter about Senator Grassley, and he is requesting that Congress defund Common Core. So I would like any one of you to please give Senator Grassley a call, thank him, tell him that the American people are behind him. I would also like you to call your own senator, your own U.S. representative. I don't know if is it Desjardins here or is it Fleischman? Okay. All right. Okay, this letter I got today, and it is from a U.S. Representative, Blaine Luetkemeyer. And he is writing this to the Secretary Duncan. As you know, the Elementary and Secondary Education Act allows Congress to authorize and allocate funding for public K-12 education, and most importantly is the primary vehicle in which we implement education policy reform. Most recently reauthorized through the No Child Left Behind Act of 2001. And basically, this authorization expired in 2008. So they aren't even authorized to do what they did with Race to the Top. And he basically ends this section with saying such action is at best in contravention with precedent. In addition to expressing our concern with the department's circumvention of Congress to reform education policy, we are writing you to express our concerns with the implementation of Common Core standards and changes to federal data collection and disbursement policies. In 2009, 46 governors signed a memorandum of understanding with the National Governors Association, committing their states to the development and adoption of new education standards within 3 years. As we understand it, states then had the option of adopting Common Core standards or creating their own equivalent standards. At the time, Common Core standards were simply an idea where states would collaborate to create uniformed education standards. Details about Common Core were not only unknown to the states, they did not exist. So when they deny, and when you say, and I've been faced with this argument, I can't tell you how many times, where they insist that they vetted the Common Core standards against the current standards. And they may have done it after the fact, but they did not do it before they applied for Race to the Top. They were not written. From there, your department offered Race to the Top grants and No Child Left Behind waivers to states under the condition that each state would implement college and career-ready standards. At the time, the only college and career-ready standards with the department's approval were Common Core. And this just goes on and on. I mean, it talks about in just one very troubling instance, Common Core standards will replace state-based standardized testing with nationally based standardized testing, the creation and initial implementation of which will be funded in full by the federal government. The long-term annual administering of the exams, the cost of which has not been specified by the department, is to be funded by the states. Common Core is going to be an economic backbreaker to every state that implements it. All the schools' bandwidth is going to have to be increased. Every child's going to have a computer, probably a new computer every year, because we know how children treat equipment. The Pioneer Institute did a very conservative estimate as to what they felt Common Core was going to cost. A lot of things they left out because they really couldn't come up with a cost. And they have a very conservative estimate of $16 billion nationally to implement Common Core. This letter, I mean, it just goes on, and basically it just reiterates everything that we're talking about here tonight. And what do the experts say? There was a team, a validation team for math, and there was a validation team for the English language arts. Dr. Milgram from Stanford University was the only mathematician on the validation team. So we have a team validating mathematics with one mathematician on the team, and a lot of what we want to call stakeholders making the rest of the decisions. He refused to sign off on the final document, and there were 5 people who refused to sign off on the math and the ELA final documents, and Dr. Milgram was one of them. He said the special interest sources were focused on making the math standards as non-challenging as possible. The core mathematics standards are written to reflect very low expectations. Basically what he said here, and there's also Zev Werman, they both concur that these math standards would pretty much put our children, by the 8th grade, put our children 1 to 2 years behind other states and other countries in math and ELA. Zev Werman says Common Core replaces the traditional foundations of Euclidean geometry with an experimental approach. This approach has never been successfully used in any sizable system. In fact, it failed even in the school for gifted and talented students in Moscow, where it was originally invented. Yet Common Core effectively imposes this experimental approach on the entire country without any piloting. Dr. Sandra Stotsky, and she was on the ELA validation committee, and she too refused to sign off on the final document. Sandra Stotsky took the state of Massachusetts from a failing school district in 1998 to an A school district in 2005. And it was due to her efforts. She has an ELA curriculum that she says she will give for free to any school, any state that is willing to take it. This is her statements. Common Core's college readiness standards for ELA and reading are simply empty skill sets. College readiness may be at about the 7th grade level. As admitted by one of the creators of Common Core, a Dr. Jason Zimba, at a meeting in Massachusetts, college readiness basically means ready for a non-selective community college, not a 4-year university, and they are his words. Common Core expects English teachers to spend over 50% of their reading instructional time on non-fictional and informational texts such as seminal U.S. political documents, court decisions, scientific and technical manuals. So we're going to have 50% of technical manuals and 50% literature, and that's going to be in the low grades. In the high grades, it's going to be a 70-30. 70-30 technical manuals and 30% literature. I've done this speech a couple times, and in 2 different meetings I've had librarians come up and tell me, they didn't tell me, they spoke out in the audience, that their children are bored. They hate this material. Why can't we read stories? And she said they're instructed to tell them if they want to get a job at Volkswagen, this is what they have to read. Sandra Stotsky rates the Common Core ELA a D. And this is a study that Sandra Stotsky and Zeev Werman did, where they compared Common Core with the standards from California, the standards from Massachusetts, and the developmental standards in Massachusetts. In 2010, Massachusetts was doing an overhaul of their ELA curriculum. So she took the new standards they were working on, and as you can see, California rated a 3.4, Massachusetts was almost a perfect A. Their new standards were also almost a perfect A, and here's where they came out with Common Core at a 2.7. What are parents saying? I hear from parents all the time. I get phone calls, I have mothers crying, teachers, I get calls all the time. Kansas mother basically was told me a story how her child came home with a petameter on his ankle, and he called it an activity tracker, and he was told that he had to keep it on his ankle all day, every day, to track his activity, how many calories he burned. He was to keep a diary of what he ate, and when he went to school, he was being interrogated by the teachers about what his parents were feeding him. Of course, the mother rebelled, the petameter was removed. 2 weeks later, the kid comes home from school with the petameter, and now it is a requirement. Next year, the meters will be fully implemented, and according to the school's website, more intrusive measures will begin. Tennessee teachers are leaving the profession. The ones that are good teachers, love teaching, they are brokenhearted over what they're seeing. They're leaving the profession. I have a little example here. I got this letter from a parent. She took a picture of it and she sent it to me. And it was a form letter that she got asking her child to participate in a survey. And the survey was being done under the guise of the Tripod Project. You might want to write that down, because a part of Common Core will be eventually children evaluating their teachers' performance. And that is what the Tripod Project is. And it is funded by Bill Gates. Some of the questions on this survey are personal perspectives and what your child is experiencing in school and in the classroom, family background, general demographic information, and issues related to youth culture and racial and ethnic identity, classroom climate, the way that students treat one another, and classroom behavior.
What state was that in, Karen?
This is Tennessee, Farragut School District.
Really? That's in Nashville, isn't it?
I have no idea. This is from Bradley County, elementary school. Leaders for Life, Voyage to Greatness, Principles for Sailing. And it's got 8 principles on here. Principle number 6, I lend a hand on deck. I am a servant leader and a world citizen. And that is right here from Bradley County Schools. And you know, there's nothing wrong with knowing about what's going on in the world. It's not like I'm against children knowing how other countries function and how other peoples live. It's not that. But there is such an anti-American theme about all of this. It's like that we have to abandon our American principles and our American culture to become global citizens. Yes. Okay. I don't know if any of you watch Glenn Beck, but he's been covering a lot about Common Core. And he had a document on his show, and I had already had this document. I almost dropped over when I heard him talk about it. It's called Promoting Grit, Tenacity, Perseverance, and it was written and can be found on the U.S. Department of Education's website. Now, if you went to look for this a couple weeks ago, you could find it in the snap of a Google. They've buried it since then, especially since Glenn Beck put it out. It's very hard to find. You can find it, but it's not easy. It's called Promoting Grit, Tenacity, Perseverance, and it is right on the United States Department of Education's website. So I started going through this little document, and I saw this thing in here called a KIPP character report card. And it had 6 teachers, where that you room for 6 teachers to score children on zest and grit and self-control interpersonal, keeps his temper in check, optimism, gratitude, social intelligence, and curiosity. Well, I was curious in what the heck is KIPP and who are they and all, so I went out and did some research. KIPP is a charter school organization, and we have 2 KIPP schools here in Tennessee. One is in Nashville and one is in Memphis. Okay, and just some, I can't keep this thing here. Just some verbiage from that. In the national policy, this is right from this document, in national policy there is increasing attention on 21st century competencies, which encompass a range of non-cognitive factors, including grit and persistence is now a part of Common Core state standards for mathematics. One of the measurements mentioned is behavioral task performance, digital measurements, MRI, facial expression cameras, posture analysis seats, pressure mouse, wireless skin conductance sensors, which are lie detectors. And if you think I'm kidding, right here in this document, there are the pictures and all the verbiage around facial expression cameras, posture analysis seats, pressure mouse, wireless skin conductance sensors. And they also talk about a thing called fMRI, where they actually image a child's brain function as the brain is functioning while it's reading or learning or under stress. That's in here too.
They want to do this to every child?
Mm-hmm. Every child will be monitored in every way conceivable. One of the, then we go down. Promoting grit states that psychological resources such as academic mindsets, attitudes, values, beliefs, and behaviors are teachable and malleable. And that's in this document. The monitoring of behavior will be used to measure a child's reactions to authority, their ability to get along. What happens if a child shows frustration or an outgoing personality? How are, this is, think about this, a young child, a child that's aggressive and outgoing, and, are they going to be malleable and mold these children into what they think these children should be? Data mining, and I'm not going to go into this because one of the things in this letter that I was reading you is this, representative's concern for the change in the FERPA laws. In 1974, the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act was created to protect the information of our children from being shared. It was not allowed to be shared or viewed unless a parent gave consent. In 2011, without congressional approval, the Obama administration changed the regulations to allow sharing of information without parental consent. Over 400 data points will be tracked and shared: biometrics, health records, personal data, discipline records, religion, political persuasion, eye movement, facial expressions, blah, blah, blah. And I'm going to skip all through this because I don't know. How long have I been yakking? Does anybody know?
An hour.
Really? I'm sorry. Okay. I think the most telling thing on here, this is from Rupert Murdoch. When it comes to K-12 education, we see a $500 billion sector in the United States alone that is waiting desperately to be transformed by big breakthrough that extends the reach of great teaching. And when I ask myself why, he just answered that question. There is a ton of money to be made in what is happening. Things for you to think about. Who is really benefiting from Common Core? Why are companies like Exxon running commercials about Common Core? Did you ever hear, did Exxon ever run a commercial about No Child Left Behind? No, but in the Masters, and they've been running commercials about Common Core. Why? Think about it. Why is GE supporting Common Core? Will the government eventually decide what career choices your child will have? Why the push for charter schools? Could it be to replace our public schools? SAT will eventually be created to align with Common Core, and what is this going to mean to our home schools and our private school students? Will we even have a need for a 4-year college-educated teacher in the future? Why not just a room monitor? Tennessee, I don't know if you're aware of this, but Tennessee just hired 704 teacher coaches. These teachers signed a 1-year contract, and their stipend will range from $5,000 to $6,500, which is a total, if you just take 5,000 times 704, it's $3.5 million. These are teachers that are already in our teaching workforce, and they will be teachers that will help train other teachers on how to implement Common Core. Why would Tennessee bypass piloted and tested curriculum used in other states for standards that have never been piloted or tested? We talked about the cost. Sidwell Friends in Washington, D.C. does not offer Common Core. This is the school that President Obama sends their children to. And I can vouch for this because I personally called Sidwell Friends. I talked to their admissions office to ask them if they were implementing Common Core. She told me, no, we implement our own standards and our own curriculum here. I said, do you have any intentions of bringing on Common Core? She said, not at the immediate moment, no. Why is the program called Common Core? Could it indicate education for the common good, the collective rather than the individual? Or maybe Common Core is good enough for the common person? Is sustainable development the real driver for Common Core education? This statement, generally more highly educated people who have higher incomes consume more resources than poorly educated people who tend to have lower incomes. In this case, more education increases the threat of sustainability. This is from a document called it's Education for Sustainable Development Toolkit. This document, this is only a piece, this is only 20 pages, this is about 200 pages in total. This document was created in 2002 at the University of Tennessee in Knoxville. And when you look at this document, there's no reference to the University of Tennessee in it. It was funded by a group called Waste Management Research and Education Institute. They are a non-governmental organization, and they are funded by the United States Department of Education. This document talks all about the Rio Summit in 1992 and how wonderful Agenda 21 is, and it talks all about how we have to dumb down education in order to obtain sustainability. Our EPA is giving out money to regions, not states, that will alter their local education to align with EPA goals. And this is a presentation for Region 3, which we're a part of Region 4, basically giving a presentation on how they can win that money. And the UN declared 2005 to 2015 the decade of education for sustainable development. And that's why I believe we're pushing now with this Common Core and having it all in and implemented in 3 years. All kind of coincides with the 2015 date. Some education history. This is just basically, from 1990, different things that have been done. President Clinton creates the President's Council on Sustainable Development. And it was clearly stated in his press release. If you go out to that website still exists. On the introduction to the President's Council on Sustainable Development, it says right on there, it is to promote the principles of Agenda 21. And I have a copy of that here somewhere buried in my papers. He also, in 1994, published Education for Sustainability, an agenda for action calling on educators to serve society by fostering the transformations needed to set us on the path to sustainable development. Agenda 21, Chapter 26, is dedicated to education, and it basically says all the same things. In order to obtain sustainability, it has to be worked into every fact and fiber of our education system. In their own words, today I promise you that the Department of Education will be a committed partner in the national effort to build a more environmentally literate and responsible society. We must advance the sustainability movement through education. Education and sustainability are the keys to our economic future and our ecological future, and this is from Arne Duncan, our Secretary of Education, in 2010. Give me 4 years to teach the children, and the seeds I have sown will never be uprooted. This is Vladimir Lenin. Your children's children will live under communism. You Americans are so gullible. No, you won't accept communism outright, but we'll keep feeding you small doses of socialism until you finally wake up and find that you already have communism. We won't have to fight you. We will so weaken your economy until you fall like overripe fruit into our hands. And this is Nikita Khrushchev in 1959. Education should aim at destroying free will so that after pupils are thus schooled, they will be incapable throughout the rest of their lives of thinking or acting otherwise than as their schoolmasters would have wished. The social psychologist of the future will have a number of classes of school children on whom they will try different methods of producing an unshakable conviction that snow is black. When the technique has been perfected, every government that has been in charge of education for more than one generation will be able to control its subjects securely without the need of armies or policemen, because we will be creating a bunch of drones, basically, obedient slaves. And this is from Johann Gottlieb Frege, who was a teacher and a philosopher in Germany. How can you learn more? Well, this first website, CUACC, it's Californians United Against Common Core. Orleen Coley is the California State Director for the Eagle Forum on that website. She has a book called Common Core, Trojan Horse, and that's why I have the Trojan Horse up there, for education reform. It is an excellent book. There's a bunch of websites on here. There are some great YouTubes. I can take this slide and give it to Mark, and he can distribute it out to you. This book I highly recommend. It not only talks about Obama's Building One America, which is basically his plan for regionalizing and tax-based sharing that Channing had talked about. It also talks about Common Core and how all of this is intermingled. This is Spreading the Wealth, How Obama is Robbing the Suburbs to Pay for the Cities, Stanley Kurtz, K-U-R-T-Z. It is an excellent, excellent book. If you really want to find out what's going on as far as regionalization is concerned and Common Core, it's a great book. And this is a DVD on my website, or our website. I don't call it mine because it's our state website. And it's the second one down, tnaccweebly.com. This is the Tennessee website for Common Core. And I can bring it up and just show it to you.
If you got an email from the Tea Party in the last couple of days, the link to that is on your email.
And this is our website, and we've got a lot of information. If you go to the More section, there is a video section, and the very first video, it's a series of 5 short videos. They're less than 10 minutes. A couple of them are only 4 minutes in length. I really recommend that you go there and take the time. I'm going to give Mark a DVD with those 5 videos on it so that maybe in a future meeting, if he has nothing better to cover, he can show the movie. But this is going to be from Mark as a thank you for having me here tonight. And I don't know if you have any questions or if we have any time.